Be honest. Look in your bedside drawer right now. I mean, literally right now.
Oh, I already know what you're going to say.
Right. Is there a $300 fitness tracker or maybe like a fancy smart ring sitting in there completely dead, currently collecting dust?
Probably buried under some old charging cables.
Exactly. And if you are nodding right now, you are definitely not alone. I am guilty of this too.
Oh, same here. Absolutely.
So today's deep dive is all about that specific drawer. We're looking at a really fascinating academic review paper titled Smart Healthcare at Home.
It is a massive, incredibly detailed piece of research.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore why so many of these cutting-edge medical wearables just end up in the tech graveyard. Like, what is actually going wrong?
Right.
We are going to examine the friction points, the hidden algorithmic flaws, and ultimately how the future of at-home healthcare isn't about strapping on more gadgets.
No, not at all.
It's actually about making the technology entirely invisible, which is wild to think about. I'm your host, by the way, and I'm here with our resident tech expert to figure this all out.
Glad to be here. And this whole topic, it is a profound structural shift in how we approach medicine entirely.
How so?
Well, to understand the urgency behind this research, we really have to look at the macroeconomic pressures. Because globally, the population is aging rapidly.
Right, the demographics are shifting.
Exactly. By 2030, in the United States alone, individuals over 65 will make up more than 20% of the population.
Wow. 1 in 5 people?
Yeah. And when you combine that demographic reality with, a sharp rise in chronic diseases, traditional hospital infrastructure is just mathematically incapable of handling the volume.
There literally aren't enough beds.
Precisely. The healthcare industry has no choice but to decentralize. They have to push continuous care out of the clinical ward and right into your living room.
And the infrastructure for that transition really accelerated over the last few years, right? Especially with the sudden expansion of telehealth.
Oh, telehealth changed everything.
Yeah, and the new reimbursement models for remote patient monitoring.
Right. Regulatory bodies finally recognized that keeping patients in hospitals just for observation was completely unsustainable. So they opened the floodgates for digital infrastructure.
Which created a massive financial incentive.
A huge one. Tech companies suddenly had millions of reasons to bridge the gap between, consumer electronics and actual clinical diagnostics.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because of that financial incentive set off an absolute explosion of AI-enabled home health technology.
It really did.
The source material details some of the capabilities of these current devices, and it represents a total paradigm shift. I mean, we are talking about repurposing consumer toys into FDA-grade diagnostic tools.
Yeah, the line separating a lifestyle gadget from a medical instrument is basically disappearing at this point.
It's crazy. The paper highlights this multitask deep learning model called DeepBeat. Have you seen this?
Yes, the smartwatch algorithm.
Right. It is designed for just off-the-shelf, wrist-worn wearables, and it achieved an F1 score of 0.96 for detecting atrial fibrillation.
Which is staggering.
And for anyone listening who might be unfamiliar with that metric, an F1 score isn't just a simple accuracy percentage.
No, it's much more rigorous than that.
Right. It's a mathematical balance between precision, meaning how many false positives the AI flags, and recall, which is how many actual cardiac events it actually manages to catch. So a perfect score is 1.0.
Exactly. And what makes that 0.96 score so significant is the environment it operates in.
Because it's a messy environment.
Exactly. Think about it. In a clinical setting, a patient is lying perfectly still on a hospital bed while connected to an ECG machine.
So the data is super clean.
Right. But a consumer smartwatch, it's trying to detect irregular heartbeats while the user is, driving a car, typing on a keyboard, or washing dishes.
That is a lot of noise.
A ton of noise. The AI has to actively filter out all of those, what we call motion artifacts. So hitting 0.96 in a noisy, uncontrolled real-world environment, that is just a monumental engineering feat.
It really is. And it isn't just isolated to the wrist either. The research points to the smartphone camera literally turning into a clinical scanner.
The dermatology apps are fascinating.
Yeah, apps classifying melanoma risks. And they also mentioned this specific app called Spren that performs 3D body composition scans using just a standard phone camera.
Yes, the Spren app.
And the claim here, which I found wild, is that it matches a clinical DEXA scan with only a 2.3% error margin.
It sounds hard to believe, I know.
I mean, I have to push back on this. A DEXA scan is a highly specialized, room-sized X-ray machine used to measure bone density and fat mass. How can a flat, two-dimensional photograph on my phone possibly tell me my internal bone density?
I get it. It sounds like marketing hype.
It really does.
But it sounds impossible. Until you look at the algorithmic mechanisms behind it, the application isn't just looking at a flat silhouette. It utilizes a technique called volumetric modeling.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
So the camera captures the surface topography of the body. It analyzes exactly how shadows and contours fall across the skin to estimate depth.
Oh, so it's reading the shadows.
Right. The AI then takes that 2D topographic map, combines it with demographic inputs like your age, your height, your weight, and it compares all of that against a massive localized database of actual 3D DXA scans.
So it's referencing thousands of other bodies.
Millions, actually. It essentially calculates the surface tension and fat distribution patterns to mathematically deduce your internal composition.
Okay, so it is using the outside to predict the inside based on millions of previous physical examples.
Precisely. The tech is there. We have the clinical-grade hardware right in our pockets, and the machine learning models to actually interpret the data.
But there is a catch.
A huge catch. The researchers point out a severe paradox here. Despite this incredibly sophisticated technology, the real-world usability is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, the abandonment data they cite is just staggering.
It's the drawer problem you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. The researchers cite a 2024 study evaluating wearable adherence among seniors. They gave these participants a basic 2-week wearable trial. Just 2 weeks.
And what happened?
More than 30% of them failed to meet the usage expectations. And it wasn't because the AI failed to read their heart rate. It was because the devices were either physically irritating or just way too confusing to set up.
Right, so basic human friction is defeating clinical monitoring.
Yeah.
For a device to monitor vitals continuously, it often relies on an adhesive patch stuck directly to the chest or the arm. And the research notes that up to 35% of users experience localized skin irritation or contact dermatitis from these adhesives.
35%? That's a massive.
It is. I mean, you can engineer the most advanced neural network on the planet,
Yeah,
but if the sensor gives the patient a rash, they're going to rip it off.
obviously. And then on top of the physical rashes, you have the psychological friction. The paper explores what they call the novelty effect.
Ah, yes. The novelty peak is a really well-documented behavioral pattern.
It makes total sense when you think about it.
It does. When someone acquires a new health gadget, there's typically a 2 to 4 week window of extremely high engagement.
You check your sleep architecture every single morning.
Exactly. You monitor your resting heart rate, you count your steps. But inevitably, the data just becomes static.
It is exactly like buying an expensive treadmill for your bedroom.
Yes.
The first week, you run 3 miles a day. A month later, it's just a very expensive clothes rack where you hang your laundry.
That is the perfect analogy.
Or it's like a car's check engine light. If that light stays on for 3 weeks, but the car seems to drive perfectly fine, your brain just stops seeing the light.
You become completely numb to it.
Right. If the wearable just tells me you slept poorly every single day without offering actionable, evolving insight, the device becomes invisible to me. I don't need a watch to tell me I'm tired. I feel tired.
The value proposition just evaporates. For a device to survive past that 4-week novelty peak, it has to offer constantly evolving personalized utility. Static leaderboards counting your daily steps are just no longer sufficient.
Which leads to a crucial question. If the hardware works flawlessly, but people abandon it because of rashes or just pure boredom,
Yeah.
is the real failure here just a lack of basic human empathy in the design process?
You are identifying a massive disconnect between hardware engineering and human-centered design.
Because the engineers aren't thinking like average users.
Exactly. When we interrogate who these devices are actually built for, we uncover serious cognitive barriers. The very first interaction a user has with a medical wearable, the onboarding process, is often where the entire failure occurs.
Oh man, the unboxing experience.
Yes.
Navigating Bluetooth pairing protocols, downloading third-party applications, creating accounts, authenticating your email with those 6-digit codes.
For an older adult
Yeah.
or just an individual with lower digital literacy, a convoluted setup process is an immediate deterrent.
It's overwhelming.
It really is. If a 75-year-old patient doesn't intuitively understand what a pairing mode is,
Mhm.
and the device just blinks a blue light at them, they often assume the hardware is defective and abandon the process entirely.
Back into the drawer it goes.
Exactly.
Now, the research does highlight multimodal support as the solution here, like moving away from a tiny, confusing screen and integrating voice prompts, visual cues, and tactile feedback.
Yes, breaking down the barriers.
They specifically mention embedding generative AI into the setup phase, which I thought was brilliant. Instead of a static paper manual that nobody reads, the AI monitors your behavior in real time.
So it knows if you're stuck.
Right. If you are struggling to sync the device, a natural voice interface might just say out loud, "It looks like the connection dropped. Let's hold the side button for 3 seconds together."
It completely lowers the cognitive load.
It acts like a patient friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, the source material also delves into a much more systemic flaw in the engineering process.
Oh, you mean the algorithmic bias?
Yes. It isn't just the user interfaces that lack inclusivity. The underlying algorithms themselves can be mathematically biased.
Yeah, the study on the body composition AI that we talked about earlier is a perfect example of this.
Very sobering example.
The researchers found that the specific AI model had significantly poorer accuracy when it was analyzing Black participants. And the root cause wasn't some glitch in the camera lens.
No, it was a data problem.
Right. It was because the data set used to train the neural network heavily overrepresented white individuals.
This raises an important question regarding clinical validity.
It does.
If the baseline algorithms do not mathematically account for human diversity, they're fundamentally unsafe for public health deployment.
It is deeply concerning. Because think about it. If a patient is relying on an algorithm to determine if they need to seek medical attention, and that math is literally blind to their physiology because of the melanin in their skin, that is a misdiagnosis waiting to happen.
We see this persistently with optical sensors, actually.
Like the ones on the back of smartwatches.
Yes. Devices utilizing photoplethysmography, or PPG for short, they shine a green light into the skin to measure the expansion and contraction of capillaries. That's how they determine heart rate.
Okay, making sense so far.
But melanin naturally absorbs certain wavelengths of light. So, if the engineers failed to calibrate the sensor intensity and train the algorithm across a truly diverse spectrum of skin tones, the signal-to-noise ratio drops significantly for individuals with darker skin.
So the data is just completely skewed.
Exactly. The paper emphasizes that inclusive usability is not just some bonus feature, it is a strict prerequisite for medical validity.
Absolutely. But, and here is the crazy paradox of this whole thing.
Okay.
Let's say we wave a magic wand right now. We fix the physical discomfort of the adhesives, we build an intuitive voice-guided onboarding process, and we ensure the algorithms are perfectly calibrated for every human demographic on Earth.
Sounds like a perfect world.
Right. But solving all of those usability issues actually amplifies a brand new problem, the creepy factor.
The erosion of privacy.
Exactly. The better these ambient sensors get at reading our vital signs invisibly, the more invasive they feel to the person using them.
That's true.
I mean, how do we reconcile clinical accuracy with the fact that literally nobody wants a hot mic or a camera running 247 in their bedroom?
Nobody wants to feel surveilled in their sleep.
Exactly. The text explicitly notes that for a significant portion of the population, continuous tracking actually induces anxiety and compulsive behavior.
Which is counterproductive to health monitoring.
Completely. If you are listening to this right now, think about how you might feel anxious about an AI listening or watching you at home. The feeling of being watched by a corporate algorithm is inherently stressful.
It is a completely rational fear.
Yeah.
Because historically, for machine learning models to improve, they required massive amounts of data to be aggregated.
Right. Vacuumed up into the cloud.
Yes. That meant your highly personal physiological data, your sleep cycles, your respiratory rate, your heart rhythms, all of it had to be transmitted to a centralized cloud server controlled by some massive tech corporation.
Which just sounds like a hacker's dream.
It creates massive vulnerabilities for data breaches, and it just feels deeply invasive to the user.
So how do we fix that? How do we actually benefit from the AI's diagnostic power without surrendering our physiological privacy to a server farm somewhere?
Well, the research introduces a structural solution known as federated learning.
Federated learning.
Yes. This is the technological shield for decentralized healthcare. In a federated learning architecture, the AI model trains locally, right on your physical device.
So it doesn't send anything to the cloud.
We call this processing at the edge of the network.
Yeah.
Your raw data never leaves your smartphone or your home hub.
Wait, but if the data stays locked on my phone, how does the global AI model actually get smarter? Doesn't the central algorithm need to see everyone's data to learn new patterns?
It learns the patterns, but it never sees the raw data.
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so your device analyzes your specific health metrics locally. It computes how the neural network's internal weights and parameters should change based on what it just observed from you.
Okay.
Your phone then encrypts only those mathematical adjustments, the delta, or the specific lessons it learned, and sends that completely anonymized update back to the central server.
Just the math.
Just the math. The server aggregates millions of these mathematical adjustments, upgrades the master algorithm, and then pushes the smarter model back out to everyone's devices.
Okay, that is brilliant. So it's basically like a student doing all their messy rough drafts, erasing mistakes, and scribbling private notes in their notebook at home. And they only hand the teacher the final, polished essay. The teacher learns what the student knows and can update the curriculum based on it. But the teacher never actually sees the embarrassing scribbles in the margins.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism. The central system gains the collective intelligence without ever accessing the private physiological details.
That feels so much safer.
It does. And this architecture intrinsically complies with strict global data protection regulations, like GDPR in Europe and HIPAA in the US.
Because there's no central database of personal health records to hack.
Exactly. When patients understand that their raw biometrics aren't being stockpiled in a cloud, trust naturally increases, and establishing that trust is truly the only way to sustain long-term engagement.
Right. So what does this all mean for the user? We have a privacy shield with federated learning, we understand the critical need for inclusive algorithms, and we know how to lower the cognitive load with better AI onboarding. But you still have to remember to charge the device. You still have to put it on your wrist. There is still a physical behavioral requirement that relies on us not being lazy.
Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this research.
Yeah.
The most effective way to eliminate the friction of wearing uncomfortable, demanding technology is to stop wearing it entirely.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
The paper introduces this massive paradigm shift called the PICON methodology. P-I-C-O-N.
Yes. PICON stands for passive, non-contact, and continuous.
Passive non-contact continuous.
Exactly. It is a framework designed to completely remove the user from the operational loop.
Which literally eliminates the drawer problem because there is physically nothing to put in the drawer.
Let's break down the taxonomy of that.
Okay.
Passive means the user never pushes a button, they never initiate a scan, they never log data into an app.
You just exist.
Right. Non-contact means no wearables, no chest straps, and absolutely no irritating adhesives.
Thank goodness.
And continuous ensures the data stream is seamless, capturing long-term trends rather than those isolated once-a-week snapshots that don't really tell the whole story.
I have to say, reading about the specific non-contact technologies capable of pulling this off, it feels like reading science fiction.
It really does sound futuristic.
Like the paper details the use of millimeter wave or FMCW radar systems.
Yes, FMCW radar.
When I hear the word radar, I immediately picture air traffic control tracking a massive Boeing 747.
Sure.
How does that translate to monitoring someone's health in a quiet bedroom?
Well, it operates on the exact same physical principles,
Yeah.
just scaled down to the micro level.
Okay.
FMCW stands for frequency modulated continuous wave. Basically, a small sensor, perhaps the size of a standard smoke detector, emits a continuous, extremely low-power radio wave into the room.
Completely invisible.
Completely invisible. Because the wave's frequency is constantly modulating, when it bounces off an object and returns to the sensor, the system can calculate the exact distance to that object based on the frequency shift.
Oh, like the Doppler effect.
Precisely
Yeah.
applied. The radar can distinguish between the static bed frame and the sub-millimeter displacement of your chest wall as you inhale and exhale.
That is wild.
It is so sensitive that it can actually measure the micro vibrations on the surface of your skin caused by the mechanical pumping of your heart.
Without touching you.
Without touching you.
Without any cameras.
No cameras involved.
Yeah.
And it operates in complete darkness, right through thick blankets.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
And it's accurate, too. The source material notes these radar systems can monitor respiratory and heart rates with 93% accuracy compared to clinical ECGs.
93%. That is astounding. And then the paper also explored camera-based remote photoplethysmography, or RPPG.
Right, the optical approach.
We talked about optical sensors on smartwatches earlier, but this technology is reading a pulse from across the room using just a video lens.
Yes.
How is that physically possible? I mean, my webcam can barely focus on my face during a Zoom call.
It relies on how ambient light interacts with the hemoglobin in your blood.
Okay, walk me through that.
Every time your heart beats, a pulse of blood is pushed through the vascular system, right?
Right.
The capillary beds in your face fill with slightly more blood during that pulse, which absorbs a fraction more of the ambient green light in the room.
Oh, wow.
This creates a microscopic color fluctuation on your skin. Now, it is entirely invisible to the naked human eye. You could stare at someone all day and never see it.
But the camera sees it.
Exactly. A standard high-definition webcam, processed through deep learning algorithms, can isolate and track those microcolor shifts frame by frame.
So basically, a physician conducting a routine telehealth video call could have software running in the background that silently reads my heart rate just by looking at my face.
Yes, exactly. The research states that during teleconsultations, these RPPG systems have achieved 96% agreement with standard contact-based clinical systems for measuring pulse and respiratory rates.
That is incredible. But let's say I don't want to install a radar unit on my ceiling and I don't want to point a dedicated camera at my bed.
That's completely fair. And you likely won't need to purchase dedicated hardware anyway,
Why not?
because you already own the ultimate PyCon device,
The smartphone.
the smartphone. A modern smartphone is essentially a incredibly dense bundle of highly sensitive ambient sensors.
It really is when you think about it.
The researchers point out that a phone left perfectly idle on your bedside table while you sleep acts as a continuous diagnostic hub.
Just sitting there doing nothing.
Right. The microphone array can passively detect chronic coughing patterns, snoring, or sleep apnea events without you ever hitting record.
And there was a third sensor application in the paper that genuinely stunned me. Ballistocardiography.
Yes, ballistocardiography is fascinating.
I had to read that section twice.
This utilizes the highly sensitive accelerometers built right into the phone, the exact same microscopic sensors that know when you tilt your screen sideways to watch a landscape video. It is based on Newton's third law of motion. Every time the left ventricle of your heart ejects blood into the aorta, there is an equal and opposite physical recoil.
Like a mechanical shockwave.
Exactly. A tiny mechanical shockwave that travels outward through your whole body. If you are lying in bed, that physical force transfers into the mattress, it travels through the springs, moves into the bedside table, and literally vibrates the smartphone.
And the accelerometer is sensitive enough to feel a heartbeat through a piece of wooden furniture.
It is. Advanced AI algorithms filter out the macro movements like, you tossing and turning, and they isolate those rhythmic cardiac signals.
That is just magic.
It monitors your heart's mechanical function while you sleep. It is entirely passive, non-contact, and continuous.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the inevitable future of healthcare.
It really feels like it.
We are transitioning out of the era of wearable technology entirely and entering the era of ambient intelligence.
The smart home becomes the smart hospital.
Exactly. It is a home environment that silently and respectfully monitors you in the background. It doesn't demand your attention. It doesn't require a frustrating Bluetooth pairing process.
It doesn't give you a rash.
Right. It simply exists, analyzing the data locally via federated learning to completely protect your privacy.
And it only flags you if something is wrong.
Precisely. It only alerts you or your physician when it detects an anomaly that actually requires human intervention.
This has been such a fascinating exploration. I mean, we started with the very relatable frustration of that expensive fitness tracker abandoned in a drawer.
We've all been there.
And we examined the friction points. The novelty effect wearing off, the heavy cognitive burden of clunky onboarding, the literal physical irritation of adhesive.
The barriers to entry.
Right. We navigated the serious mathematical pitfalls of algorithmic bias that threaten to leave diverse populations behind. And of course, the highly valid privacy fears that make us inherently distrust having a hot mic in our living room.
All very real concerns.
But we also explored the structural solutions. Federated learning, keeping our physiological data locked safely on our own devices.
The privacy shield.
And the PyCon methodology showing us this incredible path forward where radar, cameras, and literally the phone sitting right on our nightstand do the heavy diagnostic lifting completely silently.
It's a bright future.
It really is. So I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, deeply thought-provoking question inspired by the source material.
Oh, I like this.
Think about that dead device in your drawer. You abandoned it because ultimately you felt you didn't need a tiny screen to tell you how you felt.
You know your own body.
Exactly. But if our ambient environments, our nightstands, our smartphone cameras, our room radars, can silently and continuously track our micro movements, our heart vibrations, and our breathing patterns, we are rapidly approaching a point where our houses will know we are getting sick days before we even feel a single physical symptom.
Days before.
So, if the room you are sitting in right now can calculate that you are developing a fever before you even feel warm, How will that change your relationship with your own body?
That is wild to think about.
Who do you trust more? Your own internal physical sensations? Or the silent, invisible intelligence watching you from the bedside table?
Wow.
Something to mull over next time you set your phone down for the night. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay insanely curious.